All right. Hey, awesomes. Welcome back. We're still in week 8. We're going to start talking about audiences or audience and stakeholders. I'm not sure. Okay, anyway, the audience and stakeholders section. So by way of refreshing your memory, according to our needs assessment and project plan assignment description, relevant stakeholders are who's affected by the situation that your team is studying, who will be affected by implementing, failing to implement your proposed solutions, who are your likely audiences, both primary and secondary, who are you in relationship to your primary and secondary audiences, or what is your role with regard to the organization you're studying, if you're studying a very specific organization, and what do your audiences need to know. All right, so this is a really important section, the audience and purpose or objectives, as we talked about in the previous video, knowing exactly what it is that you are setting out to do for this project, identifying early on who your audiences, stakeholders are. This particular sample that I'm using, I think one of the main reasons I like to use it is because I think that the audience and the stakeholders paragraphs, probably some of the better ones I've read, and one of the best, that's for sure. I like how they are really considered and thought about all of the relevant stakeholders for the project. But I digress. All right, so understanding who the stakeholders are and how they are impacted supports the success of our project. As stakeholders, DMC-UL physicians and patients are affected in various ways. Under current practices, the institution is not upholding its standards of excellence in patient care. The continuous reporting of erroneous glucose results is not only damaging the lab's credibility, but also jeopardizing its business as doctors turn to other testing facilities. As physicians, the laboratory's clients must have accurate information to provide proper medical care. Ethically, the patient is the greatest stakeholder identified in this problem. Ultimately, it is the business of the lab and physicians to provide the patient with safe and reliable healthcare. So what I like about this is it really starts to describe and paint a picture of it's not just, I like the way, well, of course, I like the fact that it's like ultimately greatest stakeholders are the patients because they need the accurate information, but there's these other people that are involved in this process, and they are relevant as well. So then it said, who are the likely audiences, both primary and secondary, right? So we've got your immediate ones, you have secondary, maybe ancillary ones, but I like how they did this. In order to best serve the needs of the patient, our proposal will primarily be directed to, and now we're talking about very specific people. So while audiences are ultimately, right, the greatest stakeholders, the proposal itself would not, while it would, I'm sure that the patients would obviously most certainly agree, right? But we got to get in front of a decision maker. So they found the very specific person to whom this would be presented to. The key decision makers in matters of lab operations, and they determine viability of any proposal. And so now we have a secondary audience. There's also a broad secondary audience consisting of lab personnel who are directly involved with specimen testing, client interaction, lab technicians, courier, sales representatives, client service representatives. So I like the fact that they're not saying that every single one of these people, there are, when you're thinking about an audience, you have the decision makers that you think about to whom you are writing this project to. And in a situation like this, there's a ripple effect of whatever decisions are made here, they affect other people, stakeholders, secondary, even tertiary. And the assignment also asks us to consider a relationship. Now, in this particular team, they had a very specific person, Dan here, who was employed at DMC-UL and worked in there as a client service representative. So he had an interaction with physician clients and the departments comprising of the secondary audience. So the relationship was there where they could identifying how they, not only how they were getting some of their information, but via whom in this particular case. That's not always going to be the case in your project. So yours might read a little differently than that. But what is the relationship like? Maybe you're a customer, maybe you have had an experience with something, or you're familiar with a particular process or something like that. You would address that there. What do my audiences need to know? Now, in this particular case, secondary audience is not involved in the decision-making process. They will have questions about any changes made by management. So what audiences need to know, not